I think it's a very complicated question that needs a very complicated answer. But of course, unfinished conversation, yeah?
Tribalism, for me, is a mental disorder that's characterized by an innate belief that your tribe is superior to other tribes. And I'm using my language very deliberately. It's a mental disorder. Yeah, it's a mental disorder. And the people who are tribalists truly believe they are innately superior to other tribes. So if you look behind tribalism, there's a number of things you're going to find. Number one, narcissism. Yeah, a narcissist is somebody who thinks they believe they're special. It's not you and me and that other person over there who can do it. I'm the only one who can do it. And you see that with these politicians. I'm the only one who can do it. That's narcissism. Yeah? If you look behind tribalism, you're also going to find anxiety. An anxiety that quite often borders on paranoia. And you see that with these politicians, paranoia. And also with tribal, the regular Joes and Janes who are tribal, there's that paranoia. Yeah, a friend of mine was having a chat with some of her other friends, and they were saying things like, we can't give it to them, they'll finish us. They really do believe they'll be finished by one tribe or another. So that's that anxiety that borders on paranoia. Yeah, so you've got this anxiety, you've got paranoia, you've got narcissism. So if you want to really tackle tribalism, you have to do your homework on psychology. The psychology of fear, the psychology of dictatorship. It's all mind games. It's all mind games. So it's great to have these sorts of conversations, but I feel it's really important for everyone in this room to go home and do your homework on psychology. Because these words, narcissism, anxiety, paranoia, these are red flags for any psychologist, any psychiatrist. And I use the words mental disorder because when you have a mental disorder, you stop thinking rationally. Your thinking is warped. And as a result, your behavior becomes warped. So a tribal person will hear a story of a 6-month-old baby being clobbered by police and dying, and their rational mind just stops being rational. Are you sure this story is from Kenya? Yeah, but the cops were just doing what they had to do. You stop thinking rationally. Hey, there was an issue with the voting system. Whatever, we don't care, our guy is in there. This is an otherwise rational person with a normal job, walking around looking normal, and that's why I'm saying it's a mental disorder. You ask the question, why are these leaders like this? Mental disorders. And they're also of a certain generation,
Definitely, the British, I think we can blame them for a lot. No, genuinely, we really can. From how they handled the whole rule, there's this book called The British Gulag in Kenya. It was ridiculous. The Kikuyus were expelled from Nairobi, other communities were given the job. They encouraged this idea of, this tribe likes us, this tribe doesn't like us. And how even power transitioned from independence to now the so-called forefathers of Kenya, with Honorable Kamau. I like calling him Kamau instead of Jomo Kenyatta. So when that happened, what did that do for the country? Tanzania is such a good example because I think Nyerere took such a different path to what Kenyatta took. And also that's linked to the economic systems the countries were using. Tanzania took a socialist path, which of course is based more on collectivism, and Kenyans like laughing about Tanzanians all the time. But you see what that did. You weren't trying to one-up each other, but Kenya was based on, and Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was a capitalist and a very unrepentant one. And what that means is you collect capital and you sort of say it's ours. And it's not even to a lot of the guys who were fighting in the mountain, in the forests, and there were many communities, there were Meru, there were Kikuyu, a bunch of people. None of them own the vast amounts of land. I think there was just 2 years or 3 years ago where Dedan Kimathi's son climbed on top of the Dedan Kimathi statue in town because I think he was a matatu conductor and he felt so betrayed. And we'll talk about tribe in Kenya being a bad thing, but for him, ideally, tribalism should have worked in his favor, but it didn't. So I don't think tribalism has a place where it starts and then it grows forever. It's something that you continuously build because it's benefiting you. You have to find different ways to adapt it. When Moi was in power, would we say then that tribalism didn't exist because it was a Kalenjin and not a Kikuyu?
How I think about it is, tribalism became an issue when we had this is the print media. Which one came first? Actually, when media became a thing, because it only became an issue when us guys started realizing, so many people are being hired from a particular tribe because you're sharing all this information, and then now bring in social media to the whole story. Makes it even more complicated because social media it actually propagates faster than the old traditional media, and people are more aware about. Sometimes usually even non-issues. Sometimes, I know the Eldoret University was in the newspapers last week because they, apparently more than 51% of their employees are from one particular tribe, which apparently, according to our laws, is illegal. I didn't even know that was a thing. But the only way I knew that was social media. So now I have a problem because I know about it. But ideally, maybe all these people are qualified, and if I didn't know about it, would I be complaining?
Ignorance is easy to manage. It's just easy to manage. And for them, I guess what they're doing is propagating a level of ignorance. Because one thing I've always believed leaders, especially our political leaders, have been very good at is making us guys believe that they are just as dumb as the common Mwananchi, which is not the case. They want to keep the common Mwananchi very, very dumb so that they can easily propagate lies and manage.
It has a lot to do with values again. Because as a leader, even anywhere, even today, your post here today, when you're given this post, it's your values that are making you come here punctually, research more on what you will be talking about today. I believe it all still trickles down to values. If you're a leader and you say, when you elect me, this is what I'll do, I'll unite all the tribe. I believe the reason why they don't keep it is because as a person, they all have all the wrong values. They don't have the right values. They have a problem, them as leaders. And that's why if we keep on choosing these leaders, we will not have change because these leaders don't have values. If they did actually have values, then we will not even have tribalism as an issue in this country.
I think because we reward it. We actively reward leaders that divide and shamelessly use the whole political divide. We reward it each and every day. So does that mean that we ourselves, is that whole you get the leaders that you deserve? But I don't necessarily believe in that. I think we're feeding off each other, the people and the leaders. It's a mutually destructive relationship when it comes to tribalism. We actually reward it. Look at every leader who said the most offensive things, and most of them have come back. And they are champions. They're just, wow. We love them. We have them on every talk show.
I think I also agree with her. That it's like a cycle that feeds itself. So the guys who say the most offensive stuff get cheered on. Yeah, so you think about like Moses Kure, Wembe ni ule, hey, or Babu Wino, yeah, when he punched Jaguar and he tweeted it. He's like, yeah, that's my guy, he got it in. So it's like, I think there are those issues that we've talked about already, about the origins. So we kind of feel that pain, or we feel that bitterness towards that tribe. So when you come across someone who is willing to say what you might want to say, because Kenyans, we are polite on the surface. There's someone who's saying what you might want to say but don't have the guts to say. You support that guy chini ya maji. So that guy continues to rise. Yeah, it's not a surprise that Moses Kuria is still out here prospering. But we know, all he did was come up with a slogan, tip him.
I think I've come here with the question of identity being stronger than tribalism for me. Now, I'm 18 years old, which means that I'm at this point in my life where I'm really just asking myself who I am and what that means for the rest of my life. In being in Kenya, a big part of that is tribe. And I've come across this question and I can't seem to get past it, and I'd really like you guys to help me out here. Why do we still think as tribe? Why do we still see tribe, right? Now, somebody on the panel, I'm really not sure who mentioned identity politics. Okay, so Karweda mentioned representation is still important. It's very important to see yourself reflected in whoever the leaders are, which makes sense if we're thinking about gender or race, because those are things that we still haven't been able to get around. Why is it still an issue of tribe? I mean, why do we still look at our leaders and see tribe? We talked about this other really nice lady, whose name also escapes me, talked about how during colonialism there was one common enemy, and she implied that perhaps we need to have something that our leaders unite us against for us to fight. But then that that begins to make sense, right? If we're fighting something, then we forget who we are, sort of. But that still brings me back to, why do we need to forget about our tribe? Why do we still remember our tribe? Why is it that that's still something that's in our mind? Why is it that after 60 years, almost 60 years of independence, we still think the way we thought before? Does that have something to do with the way we're raised as children? And that we're told you shouldn't associate with these guys because they're low, because they'll poison you, or something mad like that. Or the same thing about Kikuyus, really, it doesn't matter the tribe. But why is that still something that we say? I think that comes back also to the question that you asked, dear moderator. Why do leaders still use tribe? Is it that it's a convenient political device that will always be there as something that is underlying? It's a really underlying issue, by the way. When you're filling in your ID, you have to give a tribe, you have to give a clan, which makes no sense. But is it that that's always an issue that will always be there, that can always be used to spark conflicts between people? Is that why we still think tribe? Because I really don't understand.
I think it goes back, I have a sense that it goes back to what one of the panelists says. It's a social construct. It's a construct. So what that means is it has been inserted into your mind. It's been inserted into your mind. One of the aspects of tribalism that I realize we don't talk about is the things we don't like about our own tribes. And I have lots of conversations with people about such things. You know, a friend of mine, it's a morbid story, but it's a funny story. Her sister went for a Luo funeral, and she was just shocked. Because you know, as Jangos, when we mourn, my God, I think even the dead person is like, whoa, enough. That is crazy. We really get out there with the crying, but it's very cathartic. And she comes from a tribe where she's Kikuyu, and we were just laughing because she was like, wow, I don't feel it's that cathartic at Kikuyu funerals. And me, on the other hand, I'm going, hey, but I think for me it's a bit too much. You know what I mean? So that's another aspect. We don't joke about the idiosyncrasies in each of our tribes, and we don't talk about the things about our own tribes that bother us. I think we need to do that a bit more often, you know. But going back to what I was saying earlier, it's a social construct. You grow up, this goes back to what I was saying, it's about the house you grew up in. It all comes back to the house you grew up in. It all comes back to the house you grew up in.
People are aspiring towards is a Kenyan identity. And that's something that I still have a problem with. Like patriotism, be proud of your country. But what about when you include refugees in the conversation? How do you look like with that patriotic outlook? Like, I'm proud to be Kenyan. So what do you think of a refugee? And probably to expand that, what about of a Pan-Africanist vision, which has been argued to be a means of breaking Africa out of the shackles of neo-colonialism. And so I think, like for me, my idea is, I think as a black person, I know my place in the world, and I think the identity that I'd possibly, I'd certainly aspire to be human, like humane, have those feelings of compassion and whatnot, but because of some of the realities of the world, of white privilege and whatnot, I'd aspire more, I think it would be I'd suggest it as an identity that one should think of in terms of mobilization, in terms of identifying. I think black is a way, but black doesn't necessarily mean black in skin. But black, there's also the black that Nyerere, in his ideas of Pan-Africanism, was thinking of, like the ideas of Uganda has been attacked, Ugandans are suffering, so we are going to send our troops. Because Idi Amin is a butcher and this and this and this. So even within that category of black, it's not so much about the skin as it is about the ideals of humanity and humaneness and ujamaa.
And yes, as she said, we're considered second-class citizens. Getting an ID was a very difficult thing for me. I had to go there about 4 or 5 times. We had to go through vetting processes to get an ID, to get a passport. I have every document intact. So, the struggles go on, and hand in hand are the Asians, Kenyans, Indians of Kenyan origin. They go through the same. And when it comes to the issue of classifying or finding an external enemy, I think Somalis have been used as that. With the whole issue of Al-Shabaab, especially after Westgate attack, we can attest to so many young people of Somali origin, Somali origin, but Kenyan, who've been held hostage. Until today, we don't know where they are. And the government is continually, holding on to them just to ensure that, whenever there's anything, that they want to loot or, they can always be used as, bait. I think it was only recently when, Deputy President Ruto's house was attacked in Sugoi. And 3 days later, they come out to say that it was a Somali, who in their wildest dreams would dare attack the second most guarded person in this country? So we're always used as, baits whenever it's convenient, and, we're always considered foreigners. It's Kenyans versus Somalis. And that's why when it comes to the issue of neutrality, you'll find a lot of Somalis who don't want to be involved or to be outspoken on various issues, because they'll always be seen as, okay, the other communities will unite against them. So until these issues are addressed, which is very colonial, as she says, these are historical things that need to address. The whole idea of secession began with Somalis back in 1968, I think. 1965, yeah, exactly. So 1965 to 1968, the Somalis tried for very long to secede from Kenya, just because they weren't getting access to so many, resources and whatnot. If you go to northern Kenya today, we barely have hospitals, schools. This is conveniently done so that, people don't prosper. And, until these issues are addressed, then it's very unfortunate. But yeah, this issue will continue.
Other people, like when you're in other places and you even say your tribe and someone asks you, mmetoka wapi? It's like you're already inferior to begin with. Hata kabla mkuje tena, you again hate each other amongst yourself when you're divided again. Where I come from, there's a lot of sub-tribes within the tribe. You already feel like you're inferior when you're in other places, and then you come back home again. There's also another type of tribalism. And I think ours, people tend to like making our problems actually simple. It's a whole complicated problem, and someone just wants to pass it away, like, they're ignorant, they're fighting over pastures, they're trying to make one big problem into something so small. And no offense, but sometimes I just look at people talk about like northern Kenya, I'm like, please just shut up, do all of us a favor, like just shut up. Because northern Kenya has like a larger problem that is making them even fight amongst each other, and it's not as basic as it's been made. And I think we need to focus more, and that's why as a youth from Marsabit, I like going for these conferences, for the, any opportunity I get to voice it, because our problems are very unique. And people from even other parts in Kenya who haven't stepped in Marsabit always feel like they have solutions for us. And that's why I always want to go everywhere and tell people our problems are unique, they're different, and no one should generalize all these problems into one thing and then blame it all on tribalism. Because there's so many underlying issues that are making people from these regions always, like they're always fighting on the news. So we need to stop making one huge complicated problem into one simple thing and assume we can just solve it overnight.
very tricky part of a conversation, and it's very dynamic. It keeps changing. Personally, there are different, I think, and I have seen that there are different types of privilege. In Kenya, there's Kikuyu privilege, there's Christian privilege, and there's, of course, the privilege that comes from wealth. Privilege doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It's not an attempt to shame you. It's not saying you haven't worked hard. It's not saying it's not a personal attack. And again, it is so important to not, like, we're human, but it is really not about your feelings. It's when I say I'm a Meru, so even though we are not in the top 4 government jobs, we have a fair bit of gamer privilege.
Yeah,
we do. So the people who are benefiting there. The thing is, it doesn't mean my parents have not worked hard. It doesn't mean I don't deserve to be where I am in life. It doesn't mean I'm not smart or fantastic or fabulous or any of that. It doesn't. It doesn't mean we are. It's very important to remember that when people say you have privilege, they're not saying that you don't have any problems. They're not saying that your life is suddenly so wonderful, you're a Kikuyu, how dare you talk to us about problems. It means you don't have the specific problems that come from a specific type of oppression. You suffer, but you don't suffer for this specific reason. When we say people have male privilege, your life is hard, boss, but it's not hard because you're a man. It's hard because of other reasons, other types of oppression. It does not diminish your life experiences. Privilege does not mean that you're rich or your life is fantastic. What Olive said actually is very true, that if you go to help, you won't get a faster process sometimes. If you're a Somali, it might be a bit different. But let's even talk about help. How many schools, look at how schools are distributed across Kenya. Where are schools more highly distributed? How are those schools funded? How are they even, lately it's when universities have been diversified. How are universities before? If we were even to look, and besides population, if we were to look at how people even go through academic institution, and not just about how smart you are, there are other issues. And yes, at Independence there were specific challenges, and it's true there aren't roads in Moyale. The problem is there aren't roads in Moyale today. That's the problem. The problem isn't that there are no schools in Turkana, or there are no schools in Western or in Tharaka. Personally, me, even within Meru, I'm part of a privileged class of the Imenti. We come from the leafy suburbs of Meru. So there are Tharaka people, there are schools there, but the people who are going to school in Tharaka face the challenges of there's no food. Getting food is more of a challenge. So it's not that your life is not hard, it's because it's not hard for this specific reason. And there's definitely Kikuyu privilege in Kenya. It doesn't mean a regular Maina or Wanjiko does not suffer. It doesn't mean if they go somewhere they won't be beaten, but it's more likely that life will be, you will not face the specific challenges that comes from your tribe. That's why you'll even have people identifying. Today we were talking in the morning with my dad about how in his local pub, there are Jamas who are just so excited about Jubilee. They feel like, wow, it's me in State House. I mean, it's ridiculous, and that's what privilege does. Just because you don't, and also it's very important to realize when I tell you you have privilege and you don't feel like you have privilege, and we're in different groups, you don't get to decide, let me think about whether I can accept I have privilege or not. I mean, even that in itself is privilege. What you talked about, how you've never had to think about an ID, like it was such a kawa thing, and yet you feel like your life has been relatively hard, like every other normal human being, right? Like you feel like even you identify with stories of, yeah, life is hard. But you haven't experienced that specific difficulty because of that specific thing that is attributable to you because of your tribe and ethnicity. You have not been held, your idea has not been looked at like, shida Kenya. Like it's specific. And even Kwanzaa Christian privilege. You know how many schools have mosques? How many? And it's like you're a second-class citizen now that you want a mosque. Who do you think you are choosing a different religion from the majority? And I think Kikuyu privilege is a thing. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, and differentiate your feelings from it.
Be very intentional about how we expose ourselves to the different cultures. For example, I've grown up in a family where my dad is Kikuyu, but he grew up in Kisumu. So it's so strange for me when 1 minute he's speaking fluent Kikuyu, and the next he can have a conversation in fluent Luo. And so for me, I think that's really helped in terms of even how I look at the Luo community and some of the values they uphold and some of the things that they believe as a tribe. And so I think being intentional about finding out why specific tribes do things the way they do them. Because if you come from a point of just trying to understand why this person thinks the way they think, then you can approach this as a situation for, we can agree to disagree on some things, but I respect this about you, and you should also respect this about me.
Here, say, this is just a funny story I just remembered. I was having a conversation with my house help, and our house help, not mine. So she told me of a scenario where in the olden days they used to get such random stories about other tribes. So because there wasn't so much spreading and of course traveling, so you'd find, like, for example, in Nyeri, they were being told that Lus probably have, like, just think of the weirdest thing you can think of. So what the people started doing in that time was sort of taking people to do sort of, let me call it a cultural exchange. Any Iseka here would sort of understand. So a cultural exchange is where you take a Kikuyu from the middle of Central and put them in Kisumu, then they discover, oh yeah, these guys are actually like normal human beings. They don't kind of have horns and, So it worked for those times, and I think the problem now is we assumed that everything is okay, such that we don't have conversations about tribe. I'll give an example. Till this election period came, I had no idea what tribe my friends were. This is because we speak English or Swahili. I have no idea whether Kikuyu or whatever. So when so much hate has been spewing on Twitter and so on, it got me thinking. Like, I sat for a day and I thought, so are my friends Kikuyu or Luo or Kali? And in that day, I actually hated all our political leaders. What I thought is, how have these guys made me care about tribe? And that is a problem, because when you sort of avoid a certain type of conversation, it's about having real conversations. So it's more of, personally, I'm Kikuyu, and it is okay to be Kikuyu, but how do I relate to a Luo? And this is some of the conversations we've been avoiding, in that you just sort of, like the new age people, no one can speak any language, but then we still sort of identify with our tribes, but at the same time know so little about our tribes. So it's more of understanding our identities and learning how to correlate and live together.